Hey guys, tonight we are standing very still at the edge of a Qing Dynasty imperial relay station, and you can already tell this is not a place that appreciates rushing. The morning air is cool and pale, smelling faintly of damp earth, horse sweat, and boiled tea leaves that have been steeped one time too many. Somewhere nearby, a wooden gate creaks in a way that feels less like neglect and more like a long, intentional sigh. You're here as a postal courier of the Qing Dynasty. And before you get too confident, it's worth saying this gently. You probably wouldn't survive this job. Not because it's dramatic or dangerous in the way stories usually mean, but because it requires a level of patience that would absolutely destroy your modern attention span by lunchtime. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, go ahead and comment where you're listening from and what your local time is right now. Somewhere in the Empire, someone else is also waiting, and it feels polite to acknowledge that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just inside the relay station courtyard, surrounded by low stone walls and tiled roofs darkened by age and moisture. Mist hangs in the air like a thought that hasn't quite formed yet. It's early, but no one is hurrying. That's the first thing you notice. No one is checking the sky with urgency or pacing dramatically. Waiting here is not an interruption. It's the plan. A widely accepted historical fact settles quietly into place. During the Qing Dynasty, the imperial postal system known as the Yezhon Relay Network relied on a vast chain of stations staffed by couriers who transported official messages across thousands of kilometers. Speed mattered, yes, but only when conditions allowed. Weather, terrain, and animal health always had the final say. You shift your weight slightly, boots pressing into packed earth that's been walked flat by centuries of other feet doing exactly what you're doing. Now, waiting. Somewhere beyond the walls, a rooster calls out. Overly confident for someone who also cannot control the weather. A fellow courier sits on a low bench nearby, sipping tea with the seriousness of someone performing an important ritual. He doesn't look at you, but his presence is steady, reassuring. You get the sense that if you asked him whether today was a good day to travel, he would answer by lifting his cup slightly and saying nothing at all. The sky above is a soft grey-blue, undecided. Clouds drift lazily, not threatening, not promising. This indecision is everything. You've learned or are about to learn that Qing postal workers did not depart simply because it was morning. They departed when the weather agreed. And weather, as you'll soon discover, is an extremely stubborn negotiator. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels almost charming in its restraint. Imperial couriers were often punished more harshly for damaging messages than for delivering them late. Speed without care was considered a failure of judgment. You glance at the sealed satchels resting against the wall and feel their quiet authority. These messages are not in a hurry. They expect respect. A light joke drifts through your mind. If procrastination had an official uniform, it would look exactly like this: calm posture, neutral expression, and tea always within reach. You immediately feel guilty for the thought. This isn't procrastination. This is discipline in its most patient form. The relay station itself seems to breathe slowly. Wooden beams creak softly as the temperature shifts. A horse snorts from the stable, unimpressed by everything. You walk over and rest a hand against the stable door, feeling the solid presence of the animal inside. The horses here are not decorations. They are colleagues, and they, too, are waiting. Historians still wonder how couriers balanced strict imperial schedules with the unpredictable realities of weather and terrain. Official records emphasize efficiency, But personal accounts suggest something more flexible, more human. Standing here now, watching mist lift one thin layer at a time, you understand how those two truths could coexist. You inhale slowly. The air is cool but not sharp. Somewhere a bell rings, once not a command, just a marker of time passing politely. No one moves. Your body begins to adjust to the pace. Muscles unclench, breath deepens. There's nothing you need to do except notice. The texture of the wall beneath your fingers, the faint clink of ceramic as someone sets down a cup, the way the clouds hesitate, as if consulting each other. This is the beginning of the journey, not the road itself, but the pause before it. The moment where intention waits for permission. And as you stand there, calm and unhurried, you realize this job isn't about conquering distance. It's about listening first. The morning continues to exist without committing to anything ambitious. The mist thins but doesn't leave. The clouds drift but don't decide. You remain at the relay station, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to understand that waiting here is not passive. It's an active skill, practiced daily, refined over years, and respected quietly by everyone who does it well. You sit on a low wooden bench that has been smoothed by countless previous couriers, each one resting in almost the same posture. Your body finds a comfortable position without instruction. Knees slightly bent, hands relaxed, back straight but not rigid. This is not the kind of waiting that fidgets. This is waiting with posture. A widely accepted historical fact settles in gently. Qing Dynasty postal couriers were trained not only in riding and navigation, but also in restraint. Knowing when not to depart was considered just as important as knowing when to go. Leaving at the wrong moment could damage messages, exhaust horses, or lead to delays far worse than a single postponed start. You watch others around you. No one checks the sky dramatically. No one sighs loudly or mutters complaints. A courier adjusts his sleeve. Another refills his teacup. These small motions feel like punctuation marks in a very long sentence. The day is still writing. There's a rhythm to this place that you didn't notice at first. A man sweeps the courtyard slowly, even though it's already clean. A stable hand checks the horse's hooves again, gently, as if confirming what he already knows. The actions are deliberate, calm, almost meditative. You realize this station is not killing time. It's inhabiting it. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels especially fitting now. Some relay stations kept informal weather notes passed down orally. Not written observations like clouds that sit low but move east, are patient clouds or horses, grow restless before heavy rain. These weren't official records, but they were trusted more than any decree from the capital. You glance at the horses again. They stand quietly, tails flicking occasionally, ears turning toward distant sounds you can't hear yet. One of them shifts its weight and exhales deeply, a long breath that feels instructional. If the horse isn't ready, neither are you. A small joke floats through your mind. Modern calendars would be deeply offended by this place. No deadlines, no notifications. Just a group of adults calmly agreeing that today will happen when it feels like it. You suppress a smile and sip your tea. The tea, by the way, tastes thin. It always does. This isn't luxury tea. It's endurance tea. Brewed to be consumed repeatedly, forgiving of neglect, and entirely unconcerned with impressing anyone. It fits the job perfectly. You notice how the station seems to soften people. Voices stay low, movements slow. Even your thoughts begin to stretch out, becoming less urgent, less cluttered. You're not waiting for something so much as waiting with the weather, accompanying it until it makes up its mind. Historians still wonder how much autonomy local postal stations truly had when deciding departures. Official Qing regulations emphasized order and consistency. Yet, surviving accounts suggest station masters often made judgment calls based on experience rather than strict schedules. Sitting here now, you suspect both were true at once. Rules existed, but wisdom decided how to apply them. A breeze moves through the courtyard, subtle but noticeable. It carries the smell of damp grass and distant soil, not rain, not dryness either. Someone looks up briefly, then returns to their tea. No announcement is made. Nothing needs to be said. You realize your breathing has slowed without effort. Each inhale feels complete. Each exhale leaves nothing unfinished. This is not boredom. This is calibration. Your body, like the horses, like the road itself, is adjusting to conditions before movement. Another light joke finds you. If impatience tried to survive here, it would starve within a week. There's simply nothing for it to feed on. You let the thought drift away. Time passes. Or perhaps it simply changes shape. The mist lifts a little more now, revealing the faint outline of the road beyond the station gate. It's still not ready. You can tell the earth hasn't decided what kind of day it wants to be. And so you stay. Sitting, watching, waiting not as delay, but as preparation. You're learning something important without being taught directly. That movement is only meaningful when it follows understanding. That sometimes the most responsible action is stillness. And that perfect weather isn't rushed. It arrives when everything else is ready. The sky continues its quiet negotiations above you, as if it's weighing options with great seriousness. Clouds slide past one another without urgency, reshaping themselves slowly, like thoughts being revised mid-sentence. You tilt your head back just slightly, not staring, just observing. Around here, staring at the weather doesn't make it hurry. It only makes you look inexperienced. You're beginning to understand that weather here isn't treated as background scenery. It's authority. Final authority. No seals, no stamps, no imperial insignia outrank it. The sky decides when letters move and when they rest. A widely accepted historical fact settles gently into your awareness. Qing Dynasty, postal routes crossed deserts, mountains, river plains, and flood-prone roads, making weather assessment essential. Couriers who ignored conditions risked losing horses, damaging documents, or failing entirely. Waiting for the right weather wasn't hesitation, it was compliance with reality. You notice how often people glance upward, but never for long. No one is trying to interpret dramatic signs. They're looking for subtleties. Wind direction, cloud height, the quality of light, the kind of things that only make sense after years of watching the same sky from the same place. A station elder steps into the courtyard. His movements unhurried, his posture relaxed but precise. He doesn't announce anything. He simply pauses, looks toward the horizon, then down at the ground near his feet. You follow his gaze and notice the dust. It lies flat and heavy, not eager to rise. That matters. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits perfectly into the moment. Some Qing-era couriers believed roads themselves had moods influenced by whether certain paths were considered reluctant after rain, others brittle after cold nights. These weren't metaphors. They were practical descriptions passed along quietly, like trusted advice. You shift your weight and feel the earth under your boots. Firm, but not dry. It hasn't decided whether it wants to cling or release. That indecision means delay. A soft joke floats through your thoughts. If the weather had an office here, it would never be open on time, and everyone would be completely fine with that. You suppress a smile. Humor here is internal. Shared amusement happens silently. Tea is poured again. No one asks if you want more. The cup simply appears near your hand, as if refilling itself out of habit. You drink slowly, warmth spreading through your chest. The tea doesn't wake you up. It steadies you. You think briefly of the messages waiting inside their sealed wrappings. They carry decisions, orders, news things that feel urgent elsewhere. Here, they're remarkably patient. You imagine them listening to the wind too, understanding that arrival in good condition matters more than arrival on time. Historians still wonder how formal meteorological knowledge and traditional observation blended within the Qing postal system. Official manuals existed, but much decision-making relied on intuition, sharpened by repetition. Sitting here now, you can feel that balance. Knowledge without anxiety. Observation without control. The horses shift again in the stable. One stamps lightly, then settles. Another flicks an ear toward the distant hills. You trust their instincts more than any calendar. They know when the road will accept them. A breeze passes through the courtyard, slightly stronger than before. It carries the faint smell of water, but far away. Not rain, not yet. The elder nods almost imperceptibly. This breeze means something, though you're not entirely sure what. That's okay. Understanding will come later. You realize something quietly profound. No one here is trying to conquer distance. Distance will still be there tomorrow, or the next day. The goal is not speed. The goal is harmony between road, sky, horse, and human. Another small joke drifts in. If urgency knocked on the gate right now, it would be politely ignored until it learned better manners. You breathe out slowly, letting that thought dissolve. Time continues to pass in its careful, unremarkable way. The clouds thin just a little, allowing softer light to reach the courtyard stones. Not approval, not yet, just consideration. You remain seated, calm and alert, part of a system that values judgment over impulse. The weather hasn't decided, and neither have you. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. You wait not because you must, but because the sky has not finished speaking. The waiting shifts its shape again, quietly, without announcement. It's no longer just about the sky. Attention turns inward, toward the things that can be done while the weather continues its thoughtful delay. You rise from the bench and move toward the long wooden table where the day's messages rest. Stacked with care and an almost ceremonial neatness. Each packet feels heavier than it looks, not in weight, but in intention. These are not casual letters. They carry orders, reports, requests, and quiet truths meant for distant hands. You don't open them. You don't need to. Their presence alone is enough to remind you why patience matters. A widely accepted historical fact settles calmly into place. Qing Dynasty postal workers handled official correspondence that was often sealed with wax, stamped, or tied in specific ways to prevent tampering. And damaging a message of an accidentally could lead to serious punishment. Accuracy and care were prized above speed. You checked the bindings, fingers moving gently, as if the parcels could bruise. Bamboo slipcases, cloth-wrapped documents, neatly folded papers tied with cordage. One prepared for a journey that has not yet been approved by the sky. You realign a stack that's already straight. It feels necessary anyway. Nearby, another courier does the same, mirroring your movements without looking at you. There's no competition here, no sense of whose pile is better maintained. The work isn't about comparison, it's about readiness. When the weather finally nods, everything must move smoothly, without scrambling or last-minute chaos. Here's a lesser-known detail that slips in softly. Some relay stations marked messages not just by destination, but by how sensitive they were to moisture, cold, or jostling. Couriers learned to recognize these differences by touch alone. You notice it now, the way some packets feel tighter, more guarded, as if asking for gentler treatment. A light joke wanders through your thoughts. These messages have better travel accommodations than most people. Protected, prioritized, and absolutely uninterested in delays as long as they arrive intact. You almost apologize to one as you set it back down. You pause and listen. The courtyard sounds haven't changed much. The broom sweeps again, slow and deliberate. A cup is set down. Somewhere, a horse snorts in mild disapproval of nothing in particular. The sky remains undecided. Historians still wonder how often couriers understood the contents of what they carried. Some documents were routine. Others shaped policy, borders, or lives. Yet, most couriers knew little beyond the destination and the responsibility. Standing here now, you feel the weight of that trust. You don't need the details. You need steadiness. You check the satchels that will carry the messages once departure is approved. Leather straps are intact. Seams hold firm. Nothing rubs or pinches where it shouldn't. These checks feel almost soothing, like smoothing wrinkles from a blanket before sleep. Another courier passes by and gives a small nod. No words, no encouragement, just acknowledgement. You're both doing what needs to be done, even if it looks like nothing to anyone else. You glance outside again. The light has shifted slightly warmer now, though still diffused by cloud. The ground looks the same. The road beyond the gate remains patient. Nothing has changed enough to matter, and yet you feel more prepared. This, you realize, is part of the system too. Waiting doesn't mean idle hands. It means quiet readiness. Everything in its place. Everyone aware. No tension, no rush. You return to your seat, hands resting comfortably, messages secured, mind clear. When the moment comes, whether in an hour or a day, you won't scramble. You won't hesitate. For now, you sit again, content in the knowledge that some journeys begin long before the first step is taken. Your attention drifts naturally toward the stable, drawn by a sound that isn't urgent, just present, the soft shuffle of hooves against packed earth. The horses have been waiting as long as you have, and unlike people, they don't pretend otherwise. They know exactly what's happening. Or rather, they know what isn't happening yet. You step inside the stable, and the air changes immediately. It's warmer here, heavier with the scent of hay, leather, and animal breath. The light filters in through slats in the wooden walls, striping the floor in pale bands. Dust floats lazily, unconcerned with progress. A widely accepted historical fact settles in quietly. Qing Dynasty postal stations relied on relay horses, carefully managed and rotated to ensure endurance across long distances. Horses were considered vital imperial assets, and mistreatment could bring serious consequences. Their condition often determined whether a journey could begin at all. You rest a hand on the neck of the horse assigned to your route. It stands calmly, muscles solid beneath your palm, skin warm. The animal exhales slowly, a long breath that feels almost instructive. Not now, not yet. You don't argue. You've noticed something subtle about these horses. They don't fidget the way animals do when they're impatient. They shift only when necessary. Their ears turn toward distant sounds you can't quite hear, wind far off, perhaps, or movement beyond the hills. Watching them feels like reading a book written in another language, one you're only just beginning to understand. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits perfectly into this quiet moment. Experienced couriers often trusted horses to sense weather changes before humans could. A restless horse might delay departure just as effectively as dark clouds. The animals weren't tools. They were early warning systems with very good instincts. You brush the horse slowly, not to clean, there's no dirt to remove, but to maintain familiarity. The rhythm is soothing. Each stroke seems to settle both of you a little deeper into patience. The horse lowers its head slightly, accepting the attention without expectation. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. If the empire truly ran on horsepower, these animals were the only ones who understood the schedule. You keep brushing, careful not to rush, letting the moment stretch. You check the tack, fingers moving over straps and buckles, confirming what you already know. Everything is ready. Everything always is. Readiness here is a constant state, not a reaction. Historians still wonder how deeply human and animal relationships influenced the efficiency of imperial systems like the Qing postal network. Records list horses as numbers and resources, but lived experience suggests something quieter and more mutual. Standing here now, you feel it clearly. The horse is not waiting for you. It's waiting with you. Outside, a change in sound reaches the stable wind, brushing across the courtyard differently than before. The horse's ear flicks. You pause, listening. The moment passes. Nothing decisive. Still, the horse remains calm. That's your answer. You step back, giving the animal space. There's no need to linger. The connection has been made. You both understand the situation. As you leave the stable, you feel steadier than before, as if borrowing some of the horse's grounded certainty. The sky may still be undecided, but the animals are not anxious about it. That confidence is contagious. You return to the courtyard, hands relaxed at your sides. The messages wait. The road waits. The weather continues its quiet deliberation, and you wait too, not alone, not impatient, but aligned with every living thing here that knows movement is only meaningful when the moment is right. The day drifts gently toward its middle, not marked by bells or announcements, but by a subtle shift in how people move. Someone brings out a low table. Cups are rearranged. A kettle appears, already warm, as if it's been expecting this moment. Without discussion, it becomes time for tea. Again, not because the clock demands it, but because the pace of the day suggests it. You sit with the others, close enough to share warmth, far enough to preserve silence. Steam rises from the cups in thin, patient spirals. The tea smells faintly grassy, faintly bitter, and deeply familiar. You cradle the cup between your hands, letting the heat soak into your palms. It feels grounding, like pressing pause on your own thoughts. A widely accepted historical fact settles in calmly. Tea was a daily staple in Qing Dynasty life, valued not just for taste but for its ability to steady the body during long hours of work and waiting. At relay stations, tea breaks were less about refreshment and more about maintaining rhythm. No one speaks right away. There's no awkwardness in the silence. It's shared, comfortable, practiced. You listen instead to the soft clink of ceramic, the faint rustle of fabric, the distant sound of wind moving through trees beyond the station walls. Each sound lands gently, then fades. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits this moment perfectly. Some postal stations scheduled unofficial pauses like this, not by time, but by feeling. When focus began to thin, tea appeared. It wasn't written down. It didn't need to be. Everyone understood. You take a sip. The tea is thin, but warm. It doesn't ask for appreciation. It simply does its job. You imagine this tea has been brewed, cooled, reheated, and brewed again so many times that it's lost any desire to impress. You respect that. A quiet joke surfaces. If this tea were a person, it would be deeply reliable and slightly disappointed in everyone. You smile into your cup and lower it carefully. The waiting room fills with presence rather than conversation. A courier across from you adjusts his posture, stretching his back slightly, then settles again. Another gazes toward the open gate, eyes unfocused. watching light change without tracking it consciously. You find yourself doing the same. Historians still wonder how such long stretches of silence affected social bonds among Qing couriers. Did the lack of conversation create distance, or a deeper understanding? Sitting here now, you suspect silence was the bond. Words would only interrupt it. Outside, the clouds continue their slow negotiations. Light filters through them in uneven patches, warming one corner of the courtyard while leaving another cool. No one reacts. Weather changes like this are acknowledged internally, noted without ceremony. You breathe in, slow and deep. The tea warms your chest. Your shoulders drop another inch without being told to. This pause feels necessary, not indulgent. It keeps you tuned to the same frequency as the station itself. Another small joke drifts by. If urgency tried to join this tea circle, it would spill its cup and leave, embarrassed. You let the thought dissolve. When the cup's empty, no one rushes to refill them. The moment ends naturally, like a sentence that doesn't need punctuation. People rise when they feel ready. You stand too, joints loose, mind clear. The tea break has done its quiet work. You feel steadier, more present, more aligned with the pace that governs everything here. The weather still hasn't decided. That's fine. You've learned how to wait without tension. Now how to let time sit beside you instead of on your shoulders. And as the day continues its unhurried unfolding, you carry the warmth of tea with you, a small reminder that stillness, when shared, becomes something almost generous. After the tea dissolves back into the day, your attention shifts to something more tangible: what you're wearing, and why it feels exactly right for doing almost nothing at all. You adjust your outer robe slightly, the fabric falling back into place with practiced ease. It's sturdy, unadorned, and quietly functional, like everything else here. A widely accepted historical fact settles in gently. Qing Dynasty postal couriers wore standardized but practical clothing designed for long travel, loose enough for movement, layered for changing weather, and durable enough to endure dust, rain, and repetition. Fashion here was never about appearance. It was about endurance. You run your fingers along the cuff, feeling the weave of the cloth. It's been repaired more than once, stitches neat but unapologetic. Each patch tells a small story of friction against saddle, against rope, against the slow insistence of daily use. This garment isn't new. It's experienced. You notice how everyone's clothing here looks slightly different, despite following the same general rules: sleeves shortened by habit, belts tied in subtly different knots. Small, personal adjustments that don't break regulation but soften it. Uniformity exists, but comfort is allowed to negotiate. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits the moment. Some couriers altered their clothing seasonally, in unofficial ways: extra inner layers in winter, lighter wraps in summer, often guided by shared experience rather than imperial instruction. The empire set expectations. The body set limits. A breeze moves through the courtyard, lifting the edge of your robe briefly before letting it fall again. The fabric responds quietly, not fighting the wind, not clinging either. You appreciate this. Clothing that resists too much only causes trouble later. A light joke drifts through your mind. Modern wardrobes would not survive this job. Too delicate, too loud, too opinionated. What you're wearing doesn't have opinions. It just works. You tug the fabric once more and let it be. You watch another courier adjust his hat, angling it just enough to block the light without obscuring his view. No mirror is involved. He knows how it sits by feel alone. That kind of familiarity takes time. You're beginning to understand how quickly practical knowledge replaces reflection. Historians still wonder how much individuality survived within imperial systems that emphasized order and consistency. Looking around now, you see the answer quietly stitched into every sleeve and seam. Individuality didn't disappear. It adapted. It learned how to be useful. You become aware of how your clothing moves with you as you walk. No pinching, no dragging, no unnecessary weight. It's designed for long hours in the saddle, but also for long hours of waiting. That balance feels intentional, even kind. The sky remains undecided. The road remains patient. Your clothing, at least, is prepared for whatever answer eventually comes. You realize this too is part of the calm. Knowing that when movement begins, nothing will distract you from it, not discomfort, not adjustment, not regret. Another small joke floats through your thoughts. If comfort were an official policy, this uniform would be the enforcement. You smile faintly and continue walking. As the day drifts on, you feel yourself settling deeper into the role, not performing it, not pretending, but inhabiting it fully. The clothing helps. It reminds you that this job isn't about speed or spectacle. It's about being ready to move slowly, correctly, and without complaint. And until the weather agrees, that readiness is enough. Your gaze drifts naturally beyond the courtyard walls, toward the road that waits just outside the station gate. It doesn't look impressive. No dramatic curve, no grand entrance, just a stretch of earth shaped by feet, hooves, and wheels over time. It lies there quietly, as if pretending not to notice anyone watching it. You walk closer, stopping just before the gate. From here, you can see how the road changes texture as it moves away from the station. Near the gate, it's firm and compacted. Farther out, it darkens slightly, hinting at softer ground. The road, like the weather, is still deciding. A widely accepted historical fact settles calmly into place. Qing Dynasty imperial roads were maintained regularly, but their condition varied dramatically with seasons and weather. Rain could transform reliable paths into slow, clinging stretches, while dry periods hardened them into efficient routes. Couriers learned to read roads as carefully as maps. You crouch and touch the ground with your fingertips. Cool, slightly damp. It doesn't cling to your skin, but it doesn't fall away either. That balance matters. Too dry, and dust blinds both rider and horse. Too wet, and wheels sink, hooves slip, patience dissolves. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels almost intimate. Experienced couriers often judged road readiness by sound, listening to footsteps, hoofbeats, or even wind passing over the surface. A road that swallowed sound was not ready. One that echoed too sharply had its own problems. You tap your boot lightly and listen. The sound is dull. Not yet. A small joke surfaces. If roads could speak, this one would politely clear its throat and ask for a bit more time. You straighten and step back, respecting the request. The road seems to breathe. That's the only way to describe it. Moisture rises slowly, then settles. The surface changes color as light shifts overhead. You realize this path is not static. It's alive in its own quiet way, responding to everything above and beneath it. Historians still wonder how much informal knowledge like this went unrecorded in official Qing documents. The roads are listed, the distances measured. But the subtle art of reading ground conditions lived in bodies, not books. Standing here now, you feel how much learning happens without writing anything down. You step away from the gate, leaving the road to its thoughts. It will let you know when it's ready. Until then, forcing it would only create problems further along, delays, injuries, frustration that no amount of authority could undo. Back in the courtyard, life continues at its steady pace. Someone checks a saddle again. Another courier stretches his legs, careful not to rush the movement. The horses remain calm. That, more than anything, reassures you. You glance at the sky once more. Clouds are thinner now, allowing more light through, but they still drift slowly, undecided. The weather is considering. The road is considering. Everything is aligned in deliberation. Another gentle joke passes through your mind. If productivity were measured in awareness, this place would outperform every empire. You let the thought fade. You feel grounded here, between sky and earth, message and movement. The road isn't an obstacle. It's a partner in the journey, deserving attention and respect. When the moment comes and it will, you'll step onto it without hesitation. Not because you're eager, but because everything will finally agree. Until then, you remain just inside the gate, calm, observant, and perfectly willing to wait. The waiting room sits just off the main courtyard, a low-roofed space that seems designed to hold people without demanding anything from them. You step inside and feel the air change again, still, warmer, layered with the faint smells of tea, fabric, and old wood. Light filters in through a paper-covered window, soft enough to blur edges rather than define them. You take a seat along the wall, close enough to others to sense their presence, far enough that no one feels crowded. No one announces their arrival. No one acknowledges it either. Being here doesn't require recognition. It requires participation in stillness. A widely accepted historical fact settles quietly. Qing Dynasty relay stations often included shared resting rooms where couriers waited between assignments, sometimes for hours or days, conserving energy rather than expending it unnecessarily. Endurance was managed carefully. Rest was part of the job. The room hums with a kind of collective patience. Someone shifts position, another leans back against the wall, eyes half closed, not sleeping, just resting attention. You follow suit, letting your spine relax, letting your breath find its own pace. There's no need to fill the space with conversation. Silence here is not absence. It's agreement. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits the mood perfectly. Seasoned couriers were said to recognize one another not by names, but by posture. How someone sat while waiting revealed experience more clearly than any badge. You glance around subtly. No one slouches from boredom. No one fidgets from anxiety. This is a room full of people who know how to pause. A soft joke crosses your mind. If this were a competition, it would be for who can sit the longest without checking something imaginary. You win nothing by thinking it, and that somehow makes it funnier. Outside, a sound drifts in the distant clatter of something wooden, perhaps a cart somewhere far down the road. No one reacts. Distant sounds are just information, not instructions. You file it away without attaching urgency. Historians still wonder how much social cohesion formed in spaces like this, where shared silence replaced conversation. Did bonds deepen without words, or did people remain politely distant? Sitting here now, you feel neither isolated nor connected in the usual sense. It's something quieter. A shared understanding that nothing needs to be said. Your thoughts slow, not dramatically. Just enough that they stop stepping on each other. You notice details you might have missed earlier, the way light settles on the floor, the slight sway of a hanging cord, the soft creak of the building adjusting to temperature. Each sensation arrives gently, then moves on. You realize that this room isn't just holding bodies, it's holding readiness. Everyone here could stand and move at a moment's notice. And yet no one is tense. Readiness doesn't require tightness. It requires balance. Another small joke surfaces. If waiting were an art, this room would be a gallery, and every exhibit would look exactly the same. You smile inwardly and let the thought drift away. The sky continues its quiet deliberation outside. You don't need to see it to know. The room seems attuned to those changes, absorbing them without comment. When the time comes, you'll feel it not as excitement, but as clarity. For now, you remain seated, breathing evenly, part of a shared pause that feels surprisingly full. Nothing is happening. And that, you've learned, is exactly what's supposed to be happening. Eventually, the waiting room releases you without ceremony. No signal is given, no announcement made. Someone simply stands, stretches in a way that suggests habit rather than impatience, and drifts toward the doorway. You follow, not because you must, but because the moment feels aligned like a breath reaching its natural end. Outside, the sky has not made up its mind yet. It hangs in a state of polite uncertainty, a pale wash of light that can't quite commit to brightness or gloom. You step into the courtyard and feel the temperature settle around you. Cool but not unfriendly, the kind of air that encourages steady movement rather than haste. This is the part of the job few people romanticize. Waiting not for orders, but for conditions. A widely accepted historical fact slides in comfortably. Qing Dynasty postal routes depended heavily on weather, and couriers were expected to delay departures if wind, rain, or heat threatened the integrity of the mail. Speed mattered, yes, but reliability mattered more. You glance toward the horizon, though there's nothing dramatic to see. Clouds move slowly, like they're thinking things through. You imagine them debating among themselves, and for a moment you're tempted to suggest they hurry up. You don't. That would be rude. Nearby, another courier checks a simple wind indicator strip of cloth tied to a post. It flutters just enough to be informative, not enough to be alarming. No one records the movement. Memory will do. Tools here are modest, and attention fills in the gaps. A lesser-known detail surfaces as you watch. Some postal stations kept handwritten weather journals, noting patterns over years, quietly predicting when delays were wiser than bravado. These weren't official documents meant for archives. They were practical, personal, and often surprisingly poetic. You suspect the entries leaned heavily on understatement. You stand with your hands loose at your sides, feeling the ground beneath your feet. Packed earth, worn smooth by countless pauses, just like this one. The stillness doesn't feel empty. It feels like a held note, sustained without effort. Here comes a small joke, arriving gently. If impatience burned calories, no one here would ever need dinner. You let the thought pass, amused but not energized by it. The wind shifts slightly. Not enough to prompt movement, but enough to prompt awareness. Someone tilts their head, listening to something you can't quite hear. Perhaps it's the sound of distant trees responding. Perhaps it's just habit. Either way, no one speaks. Historians still wonder how standardized these weather judgments really were, how much was official guideline, and how much relied on individual intuition passed down through quiet observation. Standing here, you suspect intuition did most of the work. Rules can't feel the air. People can. You adjust your stance, redistributing weight, letting your body settle into a position that could last a while. It's a strange skill, learning how to stand without waiting to stop standing. You're not bracing. You're simply existing vertically. Time stretches, but it doesn't drag. It expands like a slow yawn. You notice small details, the way light catches on a roof tile, the faint creak of a wooden beam warming, the rhythmic sound of your own breath syncing with the environment. Nothing competes for attention. Everything cooperates. Another courier hums quietly, almost absent-mindedly. It's not a tune you recognize, and that's fine. It doesn't need recognition to function. It fills a small pocket of air, then fades. You think about the letters waiting inside their satchels. Personal news, official decrees, mundane inventories. All of them paused mid-journey, trusting the sky to decide when they move again. There's something oddly respectful about that, acknowledging forces beyond schedules without resentment. If this were your modern life, this kind of delay might feel unbearable. Here, it feels instructional. The sky isn't late, it's thorough. A final glance upward tells you nothing definitive, and somehow tells you everything you need. Not yet, and that's enough. You remain where you are, part of a small group practicing the overlooked art of waiting well. Letting the weather finish its thought before you answer with motion. The decision arrives the way most important decisions do. Here not with drama, but with a subtle easing of resistance. The wind no longer hesitates. It settles into a steady direction, as if it has finally chosen a side. You feel it brush past your sleeve, testing, then approving. No one announces that it's time. Instead, movement spreads quietly, like a shared thought no one needed to voice. A door opens, a strap is adjusted. You reach for your satchel and feel its familiar weight settle against your side. Grounding and unremarkable in the best possible way. A widely accepted historical fact moves alongside you. Qing Dynasty couriers often traveled in staggered departures rather than strict convoys, allowing flexibility if conditions shifted again. Coordination existed, but it was loose, responsive, human. You don't march out, you drift forward, becoming part of the road rather than an interruption to it. The path beyond the station is narrow and pale, softened by dust and frequent use. You step onto it and feel the shift immediately, the sensation of leaving shelter without feeling exposed. The weather holds steady, cooperative rather than generous. You wouldn't call it good. You'd call it workable. As you walk, your pace finds its rhythm. Not fast, not slow, just efficient enough to feel sustainable. Your breath settles into a pattern that doesn't demand attention, leaving your thoughts free to wander lightly. Here's a lesser-known detail that slips in beside your footsteps. Experienced couriers were known to adjust their stride length depending on humidity, conserving energy when air felt heavy and extending movement when it felt dry. You shorten your steps slightly without thinking about it. The body remembers things the mind doesn't bother to explain. A small joke drifts through, somewhere far away. Someone is probably running late and blaming traffic, while you're out here negotiating with fog like a professional. You smile faintly and keep moving. The landscape doesn't rush to impress you. Low hills, sparse vegetation, the occasional structure softened by distance. Nothing demands interpretation. It's enough to notice without naming. The sky remains a quiet partner overhead, not cheering you on, not threatening to interfere. Your senses stay open but relaxed. You listen without straining. You watch without searching. This kind of awareness doesn't sharpen you, it smooths you out. Historians still wonder how much solitude affected couriers psychologically over long routes like these. Did the quiet bring clarity, or did it blur the edges of thought? Walking now, you suspect it did both, depending on the day. Today feels like a blurring day, and that's fine. The road curves gently, and the station disappears behind you without ceremony. No looking back is required. The job is ahead, not behind. You feel no rush to arrive, only a steady commitment to continue. The sound of your steps becomes a soft metronome, keeping time without counting. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls not urgently, not repeatedly, just once, as if testing the air. You approve of its restraint. Another light joke surfaces. If motivation came in weather patterns, today would be mildly encouraging with a chance of naps. You let the thought pass without waking yourself up too much. You adjust the strap on your shoulder, redistributing weight. This movement has been performed countless times by countless people. You're adding nothing new to it, and that feels oddly comforting. There's no pressure to innovate. Tradition holds. The letters in your satchel remain silent. They don't hum or glow or vibrate. They simply exist, trusting the process. You admire their patience. It's contagious. The air shifts slightly again, but this time it feels like confirmation rather than hesitation. You keep walking, confident without being alert, attentive without being tense. The road accepts you as you are. You don't think about the destination. Thinking about it would pull you forward too hard. Instead, you stay with the movement itself, the transfer of weight, the quiet persistence, the gentle agreement between body and ground. By the time the light changes almost imperceptibly, you realize you've been walking longer than you thought. Time has done that trick where it stretches and folds without asking permission. You don't mind, you're not keeping score. The fog remains at a respectful distance now, no longer something to befriend, just something to acknowledge. It watches you go, then turns its attention elsewhere. You continue onward, not chasing progress, not resisting, just moving through a world that seems perfectly content to let you pass at your own pace. The road narrows further, the way conversations do when they turn thoughtful. You notice the change not because it's dramatic, but because your steps adjust automatically, angling slightly inward, as if the path has asked for a bit of courtesy. You oblige. Fog returns in thin layers. Not the wall it once was, but a series of soft interruptions, drifting lazily across your view. It feels less like an obstacle now, and more like an acquaintance checking in. You pass through it without comment, and it parts just as politely. A widely accepted historical fact settles in. Qing Dynasty postal routes often followed older footpaths that predated the empire itself, weaving through terrain shaped by centuries of use rather than imperial design. These roads weren't built to impress. They were built to endure. You feel that endurance underfoot, worn smooth by repetition. Your breath deepens slightly as the ground inclines. Not enough to register as effort, just enough to remind you that movement has weight. You lean into it, letting gravity become a collaborator rather than an adversary. Here's a quirky detail that feels right at home. Some couriers reportedly named particularly fog-prone stretches of road. Not officially, but in private shorthand nicknames like Soft Wall or Breathing Hill. You don't know this stretch's name, but you suspect it has one. The road feels like it's listening. A small joke floats by. If the fog had feelings, it would probably be offended you're not making a bigger deal out of it. You offer it a silent apology and keep walking. The world grows quieter as elevation increases. Sounds don't disappear. They simply thin out, like someone lowering the volume rather than hitting mute. Your footsteps remain steady and reassuring. They remind you that you're still here, still moving, still part of the landscape. Historians still wonder how often couriers traveled entirely alone versus loosely leapfrogging one another across distances, connected more by schedule than sight. Walking now, you imagine others ahead and behind you, invisible but present, like punctuation marks in a very long sentence. You pause briefly, not from fatigue, but from instinct. The view opens slightly, revealing rolling terrain softened by mist. Nothing calls for admiration. It's content to be noticed quietly. You let your gaze rest without trying to capture anything. Your hands feel the familiar textures of your clothing, the weave of fabric, the smoothness of worn leather. These small tactile details anchor you, pulling your attention gently away from wandering thoughts. It's hard to overthink when your senses are busy being politely engaged. Another light joke surfaces. If mindfulness were graded, this road would earn a solid pass for keeping you present without making it awkward. You exhale slowly and continue. The incline eases, and the path levels out, as if rewarding you for not complaining. You accept the gift without ceremony. Gratitude here doesn't require expression. It's built into the way you walk. The sky above remains muted, neither bright nor dark, a neutral backdrop that refuses to steal focus. You appreciate that not everything needs to be the main character. Your thoughts drift to the people who built and maintained this route, anonymous laborers, travelers who cleared stones, feet that wore the path into being. None of them knew you'd be here now, centuries later, benefiting from their quiet persistence. The idea doesn't overwhelm you. It settles gently, like a fact that doesn't ask for acknowledgement. Fog thickens briefly, then thins again, breathing in and out with the land. You match its rhythm without meaning to. Step, breath, step. It's almost meditative, though you'd never call it that out loud. You realize you haven't thought about time in a while. Not the hour, not the distance, not the schedule. The road has taken over those responsibilities for you. All you have to do is follow. As the path bends again, you sense a change ahead. Not exciting, just different. You don't speculate. Speculation would sharpen your mind too much. Instead, you keep moving, letting the fog guide rather than obscure, trusting that this quiet stretch of road knows exactly what it's doing. The change announces itself softly, the way evening does when you're not watching the clock. The light shifts, not darker exactly, just flatter, smoothing the world into gentler contrasts. You notice it the way you notice a blanket settling by the absence of sharp edges. Ahead, a small shelter emerges from the fog, its outline more suggested than revealed. A roadside relay hut, modest and patient, sitting exactly where it needs to be and nowhere else. You approach without relief or excitement, just recognition. This is part of the rhythm. A widely accepted historical fact steps into view with the structure. Qing Dynasty postal networks relied on frequent relay points, sometimes only a few dozen kilometers apart, allowing couriers to rest, exchange horses or equipment, and recalibrate before continuing. These weren't destinations. They were commas. You step inside and feel the immediate difference. The air is still, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and old smoke. Someone has been here recently, not close enough to meet, but close enough to leave warmth behind. It lingers politely, not intruding. You set your satchel down and stretch your shoulders, slowly, carefully, like you're handling something fragile, even though it's just yourself. Your body responds with a quiet gratitude, joints loosening, breath widening. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits the moment. Many such huts contained simple logs or stones positioned intentionally, encouraging couriers to sit upright rather than recline fully, preventing stiffness and accidental oversleeping. You choose one and settle in, finding the balance between rest and readiness. A small joke wanders through your mind. Luxury here means not tripping over anything in the dark. You appreciate the consistency. Outside, the fog thickens again, pressing gently against the hut like a curious cat. Inside, the silence deepens, layered but not heavy. You're aware of every small sound, the faint creak of wood, the subtle shift of fabric as you adjust your position, the slow, even cadence of your breathing. Historians still wonder how often these shelters doubled as informal message exchanges, notes left behind. Verbal updates passed along without documentation. Sitting here now, you imagine words lingering in the air, not written down, just remembered briefly and then released. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest your attention. The darkness behind your eyelids feels different from the darkness outside. It's warmer, softer, less interested in weather. Your thoughts drift without direction. Images pass, byroads, clouds, faces you don't know. None of them ask to be followed. You let them move through like guests who know not to stay long. Another light joke appears. If naps were officially sanctioned, this would be the gold standard of resting without resting. You don't nap, you hover near it, which feels safer. Time behaves strangely here. It doesn't stop, but it doesn't insist either. You could be here minutes or longer. It doesn't matter. The hut exists to absorb pauses, not measure them. Eventually, you open your eyes and take in the space again, refreshed, without feeling interrupted. The fog outside seems to have softened, its presence less dense, more negotiable. You sense not, decide that it will be passable soon. You stand, lift your satchel, and adjust the strap. The familiar weight returns, reassuring in its predictability. You take one last look at the hut, offering it silent thanks without ceremony. Gratitude here doesn't need language. Stepping back onto the road, you feel the transition immediately, the open air, the subtle resistance of movement resuming. The fog parts just enough to acknowledge you, then drifts back into place. You continue forward, carrying rest with you rather than leaving it behind, ready to let the road pick up the sentence exactly where it left off. The road greets you again like an old colleague who doesn't bother with pleasantries. It feels familiar underfoot, even though you've never walked this exact stretch before. That's the trick of well-used paths. They teach you quickly how to belong. The fog has thinned to a translucent veil, no longer obscuring direction, just softening perspective. Distant shapes appear and disappear at their own pace, like thoughts you don't chase. You let them come and go without attachment. A widely accepted historical fact settles into your stride. Qing Dynasty couriers were expected to maintain consistent pacing rather than bursts of speed, ensuring endurance across long distances. Efficiency here wasn't about rushing. It was about arriving intact. Your body moves with practiced economy. Arms swing lightly, steps land where they need to, not where they're squeezed. You feel tuned rather than tired, like a tool that's been used correctly. Here's a lesser-known detail that quietly delights you. Some routes were deliberately designed to include visually repetitive scenery, reducing mental fatigue and helping couriers maintain focus without overstimulation. Walking now, you understand the logic. Nothing competes for attention. Everything supports momentum. A small joke drifts by. This landscape would make a terrible postcard, but an excellent long walk. You approve of its priorities. The air cools slightly, brushing your face with the kind of chill that sharpens awareness without discomfort. You inhale and smell damp earth, faint vegetation, and something mineral you can't quite name. It doesn't need a name to be effective. Historians still wonder how couriers mentally marked progress without modern distance measurements, whether they counted steps, landmarks, or simply trusted the feel of time passing. You don't count anything. Your sense of progress comes from rhythm, not numbers. The path curves again, and with it comes a subtle shift in sound. The silence here isn't empty, it's layered. Somewhere ahead, water moves gently, perhaps a stream, perhaps just wind playing tricks. You don't investigate. Anticipation would pull you forward too hard. Your thoughts feel unusually cooperative, lining up instead of overlapping. Ideas come, bow politely, and leave. It's a pleasant surprise. You hadn't realized how noisy thinking could be until it quieted down. Another light joke surfaces. If your mind were a room, someone finally remembered to turn off the background radio. You enjoy the quiet. The fog lifts just enough to reveal a faint glow ahead, not a light source exactly, more like the sky, remembering how to be lighter. Dawn isn't arriving yet, but it's considering it. You nod back, acknowledging the possibility without expectation. Your pace remains steady. You don't speed up in response to the glow. That would break the agreement you've made with the road. You let the light come to you instead. The satchel rests comfortably against your side, its presence constant but unremarkable. You've stopped checking its weight. Trust has replaced verification. As you walk, you feel a gentle accumulation, not of fatigue, but of calm. Each step adds to it, layering quiet on quiet until the world feels padded, like a room designed for rest rather than performance. The fog finally thins enough to stop being a character in your thoughts. It becomes background again, doing what background does best, supporting without demanding. You realize you're nearing another transition, though you can't see it yet. The road feels different, more open, as if preparing to hand you off to something else. You don't brace. You stay loose. With one more steady breath, you continue forward, carrying with you the calm efficiency of the walk, ready for whatever gentle change waits just beyond the curve. The final stretch doesn't feel final while you're in it. It feels like a long exhale that's been happening for a while now. One you only notice because your shoulders drop another fraction of an inch. The road widens slightly, not to impress you, just enough to make walking feel easier, like the land itself is offering a small courtesy for your patience. The fog thins until it's no longer a presence, just a memory clinging lightly to low places. The sky opens into a pale, even tone, neither morning nor evening in spirit, just a calm agreement between light and air. You walk into it without ceremony. A widely accepted historical fact settles in gently. Qing Dynasty postal routes were designed to favor consistency over speed, ensuring messages arrived intact, even if that meant slower travel. Reliability, not heroics, kept the system alive. You feel aligned with that philosophy now. Nothing about your movement is impressive. Everything about it is sustainable. Your body feels quietly capable, not energized, not depleted, just functional in the way well-used tools are functional, smooth at the edges, predictable in response. Each step lands where it expects to land. Each breath arrives on time without being summoned. Here's a lesser-known detail that surfaces like a soft footnote. Veteran couriers often reported that the final stretch of a route felt longer than the rest. Not physically, but mentally, because attention loosened once the pressure of conditions passed. You notice that loosening now. Your thoughts drift wider, less tethered to the road beneath you. A small joke drifts through. This is the historical equivalent of putting your bag down at home and realizing your shoulders were doing way too much work. You adjust your posture slightly, and everything feels better. The landscape ahead shows signs of human presence, not crowded, just hinted at, a distant structure. A line where earth meets something shaped by hands. You don't rush toward it. Arrival doesn't need encouragement. Historians still wonder how couriers transitioned back into ordinary life after long solitary routes, whether the quiet lingered or dissolved immediately into noise and obligation. Walking now, you suspect the quiet stayed a while, trailing behind like a respectful companion that didn't need to be invited in. Your senses soften further. You hear sounds without categorizing them. You see movement without tracking it. Awareness remains, but effort has stepped aside. This is not fatigue. It's completion. The road finally meets another path, wider and more worn, evidence of many directions intersecting. You slow, not because you must, but because the moment feels like it deserves acknowledgement. You've carried messages through fog, patience, waiting rooms, weather debates, and quiet shelters. Nothing dramatic happened. And that's the point. You stop not abruptly, just naturally, and stand for a moment, letting the stillness settle again. The satchel rests at your side, lighter now in a way that has nothing to do with weight. The journey has been delivered, along with its contents. Another gentle joke arrives, almost a whisper. If all endings were this polite, history would need fewer footnotes. You smile, barely. You take one last look down the road you've traveled. It doesn't look different for having known you. That's comforting. You were part of it, not its highlight. As you turn away, the world doesn't rush in to replace what you're leaving. It simply continues, making room for you to step into whatever comes next, at the same unhurried pace. You walk forward, not carrying the journey with you, but wearing it lightly, like a well-fitted coat you don't need to think about anymore. Now, you let everything slow even further. There is nothing left to carry, nothing left to decide. The road fades into something abstract, like a memory you don't need to replay to keep. Your breathing lengthens on its own, each inhale unhurried, each exhale releasing whatever small tension might still be lingering in places you forgot to check. Imagine the scene gently dimming, not going dark, just softening around the edges. As if the world is being tucked in alongside you. The air feels even, supportive, holding you without asking for effort in return. Your body knows what to do next. You don't need to instruct it. Thoughts may still drift by, but they move slowly now, like clouds with no intention of forming a storm. You don't follow them, you let them pass, trusting that anything important knows where to find you later. There is a sense of having arrived, not at a place, but at a state calm, steady, and safe. You are allowed to rest here. Nothing is expected of you. Nothing is missing. With each breath, you sink a little deeper into comfort, into quiet, into a gentle awareness that gradually loosens its grip. The journey has done its work. All that remains is rest. Sweet dreams.